Hey guys, Dennis here. Welcome to the first episode of Spooky Storytime with Dennis. For those of you who are new to the channel, this is what I used to do for the outros of my regular videos. The contents and the way I tell the stories are far less formal than my regular videos. These are my experiences or the experiences of the people that I know. I don't write down anything and I tell the stories from the top of my head, so just keep that in mind as you watch this video. The long-time subscribers will know I grew up in several different countries when I was a kid. Those are Japan, Italy, South Korea, Paraguay, and the US of course. This story is from the time when I was living in South Korea and I was maybe 9 years old at the time. My dad built a house in a town called Mansudong. He actually built it with the help of his brothers. It was in the countryside, but it's tricky to classify it because we were only about an hour and a half away from a big city, but we were surrounded by nature. Mansudong was a small town with a population of maybe less than 500 if I have to guess. Lots of farmers and ranchers lived in that area. We had empty fields as far as the eyes can see. We had the creeks where we could cool down during summer. We had baby mountains, which were more like giant hills looking back. It would take maybe half an hour to hike from the base of the mountain to the summit. So yeah, baby mountains. As you might imagine, Mansudong's children played very differently from the kids in the city. I was one of them, the only city kid in town when I first moved there. My playtime normally revolved around the playground, arcade, and the comic book store, but all of that went out the window once I moved to Mansudong. Winter and early spring, we ride the sled and build forts with snow. Summer and fall, we played at the creek, in the mountains, and sometimes dare ourselves to go to the cemetery at night and leave something of ours as proofs. But that's a story for another day. This story takes place in the summer, and once again, I was 9 years old. My friends and I were walking toward one of the mountains because we have to go over one of those in order to get to the creek. Now, why the creek? Well, the creek because we were going to catch some frogs. And why the frogs? Well, we were gonna eat them. Now, you might be thinking, oh, that's disgusting. You guys ate frogs? The answer to that question would be an absolute yes. If it makes any difference, we didn't eat the entire frog. You just eat the legs and and that's it. I don't know if that makes it better. They taste like chicken, by the way. I'm not kidding. I actually learned to eat a whole bunch of things while living in Mansudong. We had flowers that we could eat. You don't actually swallow the flower, but you chew it, drink all the nectar, and spit out the rest. There were many leaves that we could eat, and those we actually swallowed. That makes it sound like something different. Okay, anyways. I'm telling you, if you know what you're doing out in the wild, you can actually obtain sustenance from the land with a little bit of effort and a strong stomach. So yeah, we crossed the enormous field of grass, get to the base of the mountain, eat leaves and roots of plants as we climb up. But we had to make a stop in the middle because one of the kids had to take a poo. We took a lot of dump on that mountain. But for those of you who are environmentally conscious, you need not mind about this at all. The amount of uninhabited land per capita in that town was incredible at the time. The whole town could decide to come out to the mountain one day, and for whatever reason, should all of them take a poop there for an entire day, the population couldn't even begin to make a dent on nature. It would be a different story should the populace of New York City, for example, took one poo each in Central Park. It would take less than an hour for the park to overflow with human feces. Oh god, I'm such a child. I'm sorry, I like joking about poo like I'm still 5 years old. But going back to the story, yeah, things were very different back then. Today, Mansudong is just another developed town with tall buildings and lots of cars. The cost of modernization, I guess. So poo. One of our friends had to take a poo. His name was Chunsu, but we'll just call him Chun for this story. The rest of us, which was like 5-6 guys and 3 girls, we hung out nearby, doing random things, but of course far enough to give Chun some privacy. 5 minutes go by, then another 5, and the rest of us start to get impatient. I'm the first one to shout, "Chun, your anus will rip if you poop for too long." And the rest of the guys begin to taunt him, saying things like, "The rats will eat your balls if you stay squatting butt naked." We had field mice. "Keep moving or your fart will kill you," and other immature things children would say. Chun is a feisty one, and he would normally say something back, but we get nothing from him after all the taunts. I look toward the tree line where Chun's supposed to be, but there's no one there. I'm thinking he's probably moved inward toward the thicker vegetation because after all, there were 3 girls in the group, and what boy in the right mind wants to show his naked butt to a girl? Still, I'm a little concerned, and so I walk in the direction where Chun's supposed to be, but he's nowhere to be found. I tell the kids that Chun's disappeared, and all of us begin shouting out his name in all directions. After a while, it dawns on us so clearly that it's missing. So I send back 2 kids into town, and I tell them to bring the adults while the rest of us split in 2 groups and begin looking for Chun. These were some good friends because everyone refused to live without Chun. At the time, an urban legend about an old lady from Hong Kong was really popular. We called her Hong Kong 할매, which translates to Granny from Hong Kong. The story goes, an elderly woman from Hong Kong was visiting Korea. After she was done with the sightseeing, she was flying back to her country when her airplane crashed. She had her cat in the cargo, and when they both died, they fused into a singular being, thus making her a cat lady of sort. They said the plane had crashed in Korea, and now the Hong Kong 할매 lives in a cave in a mountain. She was known to come into town once every so often, and she would lure children back to her cave to eat them. That's the gist of the urban legend, and I know to us adults it sounds like a complete fiction, and it was. But you have to understand, we were children as young as 7, 6. These things were very believable back then. It must have been about half an hour or maybe a little more when we heard the adults shouting Chun's name. We felt relieved, of course, but we weren't about to give up on the search just because the adults were here. We pushed on and went into a part of the mountain where the landscape is a lot flatter than most everywhere else. That whole area is filled with trees and tall plants, so it's really easy to get lost in there. We normally stay out, and only a few kids in town had ever ventured in there. One of them being me, not because I was one of the brave ones, but only because I was one of the older kids. I had been there twice previously, but it was truly astonishing how easy it is to lose your bearing once you are surrounded by hundreds of trees. We had walked into the forest for only like 5 minutes, and we were already lost. Now, normally, we just walk in one direction and eventually come out to somewhere that we can recognize. But today, of course, is different. In our minds, the Hong Kong 할매 could be living in these woods. The worst thing that you can do when you are lost in the forest is to panic, but that's exactly what we did. We went in circle for like an hour when we fully understood that all we had to do was to choose one direction and just walk straight. Sometime later, we come across a cave. All of us are terrified and we are thinking that we delivered ourselves to become Hong Kong 할매's next meal. I'm thinking of turning around when a kid who was a couple of years younger than me goes, "We have to go in there to look for Chun." I felt a little embarrassed, but still terrified of what might happen to us once inside the cave. We go in anyway, and initially, I thought the cave stretched really far due to the large entrance. Once inside though, the corridor began to narrow to about 6 feet in height and about 4 feet wide. It takes us no more than 2 minutes to reach the end of the cave, and guess who we found in there? It was Chun. But here's where the story gets really strange. Chun was awake. He was sitting down on the floor of the cave, but looking up at about 45-degree angle as if he was admiring something in the air. I tried to shake him out of bed by calling his name, tapping on his shoulder, and later I even slapped him on the face. That's when he sort of woke up, but he wasn't responsive like a normal person would be. The way he reacted was more like if I say, "Hey Chun," then he'd go, "Huh?" and just go back to admiring the empty air. We carried Chun out of the cave, and once outside, we decided that we were going to pick a direction and walk straight, as we were supposed to when we first got lost, even though the getting lost part is what got us to Chun. It took one good night's sleep for Chun to go back to being normal, but he never remembered how he got to the cave in the middle of his pooping and why he was admiring the air or the wall in the cave. The adults and the police kept themselves busy for the next 2 weeks searching for illegal mountain dwellers, but no one was found. When the search was concluded, they blocked off the entrance to the cave with the use of a bulldozer and a digger. When they were done, the entrance of the cave was covered with dirt and boulders. Nothing could ever go back in. We were told to never go back to the mountains, but who are you kidding? It took no less than a week for us to break our promises to our parents, and we continued to poo on the baby mountain. And yeah, looking back, I still have no clue how Chun ended up in that cave that day. My best guess is that he may have gotten disoriented because he was probably trying to move as far away as possible from the group, seeing as how he was pooping. It's very easy to get lost in the woods. Another possibility is that he was I'm not gonna say the words, it's one of those words that can get your video flagged. I'm gonna say taken. So another possibility is that he may have been taken by someone and we happened to find him in the cave while the taker was out. God, for God's sake, I can't even say the words. Fortunately, no child has ever been harmed in that town, at least not for the 2 years my family and I lived there. However, there are some other spooky things that has happened there, but I'll leave that story for another day. Alright guys, I'm gonna wrap it up here. Let me know in the comment section how you enjoyed this format of video, or maybe how you disliked it. Hopefully not. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye for now.